Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men. And on this show, we will hear real-life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. Welcome, everyone. I'm Brandon Archer. This is Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? Today's guest, Kevin Benevides. Did I say it wrong even though we just went over it?
Yeah, you did, but it's all good.
Okay, correct me then. Let's get it right.
Kevin Benevides.
Okay, there you go.
It's all good.
You might have seen Kevin from his Instagram handle, which is the Canvas Within. That's where I met Kevin originally, and I was super stoked that he wanted to get on here and have a chat because we kind of do something very similar. Wouldn't you?
100%.
Wouldn't you say?
I would say, yeah.
You seem to
We've always resonated with what we put out there, and then when we started connecting, it was like, yeah, we're pretty much on very similar paths, right?
Totally.
With our work, yeah.
Yeah, totally. And is your teachings and your business path a result of your life experience?
100%.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what I tell everybody who comes, whoever wants to, interested in working with me, and they ask about my qualifications. And although, I've taken courses and certified in this and that, it's like, it's my life experience. It's what I've gone through, what I've learned, what I've applied. And now, obviously learning as I coach and support more men, but it's basically from what I've gone through in my life and continue to go through, because I'm a human being like everyone else, and you can continue to work through things and grow and all that amazing stuff, right?
Yeah, I like that. Let's circle back to that in a while. Why don't you what landed you into helping men? Like, what's your story?
Yeah, it's interesting enough. I'll tell them the full story, but I initially didn't want to focus in on men, because initially when I got into coaching a few years ago, or even had the thought about it, the desire for it, I was afraid of men. And so I was like, hell no. Like, I had at the time a few years ago when I was transitioning from my social media business into coaching, I had a business coach, and she's like, men need you. And I'm like, what? So they're like, the things that you say, the things that you talk about on your, at the time it was my Facebook page and stuff like that. She's like, men need that. And I'm like, yeah, but internally I'm like, yeah, but I'm not comfortable talking to men. So initially it wasn't men. And so, but eventually it became men, because one, I was like, life was just showing me you're meant to do work with men. And then two, I was just like, yeah, like I went through this for a reason, and it's to help other men. Not that I haven't helped women, supported women in my coaching, but it's mainly men. And so anyways, that's a short story of what happened a few years ago. But initially, why I'm even here talking to you and in this path in my life is because I've gone through some hard shit, just like a lot of other men have. About 10 years ago, was living the quote unquote normal life, which is like got married young, had kids, had the 9-to-5 job that I didn't like, and just did the same thing day in and day out. And about 10 years ago, my dad got really sick, to the point where we thought he was going to pass away. Or at least I thought he was going to pass away. And because of these events with my dad's health, a lot of anxiety came up. So I lived with a lot of anxiety, didn't even know what it was called or what it was until that point. But my anxiety skyrocketed. And then from there, because I started to sort of grieve my dad, even though he was still alive, all this stuff from my childhood came up. All these memories that I had suppressed came up, and I had to and everything was there, right? So there was basically like an emotional and mental shitstorm for like 6 months. And that's really what set me on this path, is because I'm like, came down, 6 months down the road, I was like, I cannot continue living this way, because I was so depressed. I had so much mentally and emotionally going on, and I didn't know how to function. And so eventually I reached out to someone who I thought I was just going to learn about mindfulness practices, mindfulness meditation. Meanwhile, he opened up the door um, to my inner world and to understanding my relationship with my dad. And that's really when things start to shift and improve, especially at that time with my anxiety and stuff. Things got better because he was helping me through it. But that just opened the doors to my passion to, personal transformation, healing, and at the time really spirituality as well. So that's really where it started. And over the years, it's just continued to be my passion until, like I said, a few years ago, I was like, I want to coach. And then I already told you that story, right? And then it was just like, okay, I want to coach. I just don't want to talk about this online, because I was sharing my journey here and there. But I was like, I want to actually impact other human beings' lives. And so here I am today, almost 3 years into this. So yeah.
Yeah, man, thanks for sharing that. Because, I had a moment too where it's like, whoa, well, I got to figure life out. So I wonder if, I'm curious if you think that's just what needs to happen for men. Do we need like a wake up call?
I want to say no,
Yeah.
but I think that the answer is yes. I think so many of us men need that sort of like shot across the head, down to your knees, down to your, rock bottom per se, whatever. Everybody has different rock bottoms, but like, I think it almost has to be for a lot of us men to really be like, fuck, I got to do something.
Yeah.
So
I want to say, I'd have to agree with you. And like you, I want to say, no, it doesn't have to be that way, but I don't know. Seems to be a pattern with the guys we probably work with, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you said stuff came up when your dad got sick that you had to process.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things came up?
Um, just things that he said and did when I was younger
Mm,
that I remember. So this might answer your question in an indirect way, but still answer it. I remember, I don't know if it was the first night when he went into hospital, when he was rushed into surgery, like to do his procedure that he had to do, or if it was the night after that. But one of the first 2 nights when he was in hospital, and like I was like, fuck, this guy, he's done. Like there's no way he's
mm,
gonna get through this. I remember coming home, getting dressed to go to bed, and just like losing it, like emotion, like tears flowing, and just screaming. And I'm like, all this stuff that I knew was there, but I didn't really ever give attention to, started coming up, and I started to share it with my wife. I'm like, he did this and he said that, and all these things that were really, really, when I say it, it's like, well, yeah, that's not okay. That wasn't okay that he did this, or he said that, or he threatened that, or whatever. And this is no shot on my dad or anyone who listens who knows my dad, but like it's true. Like a lot of things happen that wasn't okay. Um, and I was confronted with that all at once. I felt like it. And at that point in my
yeah.
life 10 years ago, it was like everything was like here. It's like you cannot not look at this anymore. And I think what also made that come up was the thought that I'm never going to have a father. At that point, I was like, I haven't had a father, and now I'm going to lose my father. And so that was really fucking hard.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You know, I listening to you, I'm reflecting on my dad too. And he made a lot of mistakes as well. And I think I'm not bitter anymore. I was bitter for a long time and angry.
Mm, mm.
And, for me and maybe for you too, I finally had to see him as human.
That was the turning point for me, man, as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm sure too, guys you work with and the work you've done on yourself, we as kids, our parents are gods, literally, by
Yeah.
definition. We
Yeah.
look to them for everything. And when we when they can't live up to that because they're humans, there's so much that we're left with as adults to carry.
Hmm. Yeah. And a lot of us carry it, not even knowing we're carrying it. Right.
Yeah. So what did you do? Like, you had the proverbial getting cracked open moment. How did you learn to carry all that yourself? How did you learn to move through it? And
So initially, eventually, after that moment or those moments, I started to see a mental health counselor. And I remember just talking about my dad and talking about what we went through, and he just helping me with that. Um, and then eventually, it was when I met my mentor, per se, is when he started to break down um, the spiritual aspect, like helping me understand and see, oh, like it wasn't that he didn't love you, it wasn't that he didn't care about you, it was because he was dealing with X, Y, and Z. And I started to, learn about his past, myself learning about my father's past. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And like I started learning about things that I didn't understand about human beings and just in general, right? Like, because from my worldview, from the life I've lived, I never understood why people are the way that they are, I guess is the best way. And so to say it. And so um, you asked how was I carrying it? Not very well. Not very well for a while. Like I said, those 6 months were really challenging. As much as I was understanding more about myself and my dad and my past, it was very challenging until, again, there was just this moment. And it, I want to, anyways, I guess the way I would try to say it is there was this moment where I was watching a video, as cliched as this might sound or stupid this might sound. I was watching a video by Eckhart Tolle, and I can't remember exactly what he said. Um, and and it just hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks where I was like, oh fuck, like this guy didn't mean to do this stuff to me or not do these things. It was more so that he didn't do these things for me. It wasn't because he didn't love me. It just hit me. And I remember that day I was watching that at work, actually, when I was working an office job. I was watching it at work. And when I drove my wife home that night, I remember telling her, just like bawling my eyes out driving. And uh, I'm like, he didn't mean to do any of it. It wasn't his fault. And I was just like, and I, even at that time, I didn't fully understand, but I was basically saying like, it wasn't his fault. He went through a lot of shit himself. And it just clicked. Everything clicked. And when that clicked, it was like a big part of me was just like, put at ease.
yeah,
Because what I think what it was it wasn't me. I wasn't at fault. I wasn't flawed, right?
you didn't
So
make him do those things.
exactly. Yeah.
Man, that's profound. That's profound. And I hope guys listening that have either gone through times like that or carry a lot of bitterness towards their dad understand, like, this is a very interesting area about how we relate to our parents and our dads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it forms who we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not aware of how it's formed you, it can, I don't like using the word control, but it does control you. But would you say, with your experience, it doesn't have to?
Yeah. No, it doesn't have to until that moment, right? It will until that moment or moments when you start digging into this stuff for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't control you.
I think that's, man, I remember like pre-understanding all this stuff similar to you. Like, how do we operate as humans? Why do we do the things we do? You just like, I held my parents to this standard. I'm like, you should have done this, you should have done that. And it just, should they have? Well, you could argue maybe, but the thing is, they did the best they could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for me, that was pivotal, and kind of sounds similar with your dad. Like he didn't mean to do these things. And people listening might be like, "That's stupid." If your parents do something traumatic, perhaps some kind of physical abuse, there's ownership of their behavior, and there's actually understanding what's driving them to do that. It's
Yeah.
very different.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe
And also, sorry, go ahead.
we should just riff on that, because I think that's useful for people to understand.
Yeah. The difference between what was the two things that you said?
Well, owning their behavior,
Yeah.
right? And versus like what's driving them to act a certain way.
Exactly. Yes.
And we're
Yes.
we're both parents. There was times when I'm like, why the hell am I yelling at my kids?
Yeah.
So, shoes sort of on the other foot, right? Because I didn't understand. And sure enough, one day they're going to have to like figure out, well, why did he talk to me
Exactly.
that way? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
swear to God, guys, I never wanted to say that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Owning
So,
the owning of it is the thing where you get to separate yourself. Like if even today, if they don't want to own up to what they've done or how they even still are, that's where you get to place the boundaries that you need. You get to do what's best for you. But holding on to like why they did that or why they're even that way right now,
ooh,
like that's like if you're like, well, you're a horrible guy, or he's like, no, like you're hurt, and that's
yeah,
why you're behaving that way, even still today. And so for me, it gives me, at least for myself, it gives me compassion, not just for dad or mom, for everyone, right? When I really sit with it and like, oh, why, like that's not okay that they're acting that way, and I can understand, right? There
yeah,
must be something because when when you're happy, for whatever reason you're really really happy, you're not going to be the person who's going to be hurting someone else or doing or saying something to hurt someone else because you're in this state of happiness, right? But when you're mistreating someone, there's a reason why there's something poking at your pain. And so it's like the understanding that we don't want to be hurtful, um, human beings. We really don't. I don't care who you are, who you've ever been, whoever's walked on this planet. The only reason people hurt other people is because one, they're hurt themselves, and two, they don't really know who they are.
yeah,
So that's my perspective on that. And even still today, like my dad will say and do things, if we're talking about like coming back to that, he will say and do things that is not okay. And I can say to him, hey, please don't say that, or like that's not okay. But me wanting him to be different, that's
never
gone.
gonna happen. Yeah,
That's not, it's gone. Like I don't need that anymore.
yeah,
Right? I can place boundaries. I can live my life differently to honor myself, but to expect him to be different, not like it's not there.
which is freedom, which is
Yes.
power. It's
Yes.
power too, right? I think, when I was hearing you share, and what it makes me think of is giving away your personal power. So the only person that's suffering when we expect something from somebody else is us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that is it's a bit of a mind fuck, because it's like, no, they did this thing to me. I'm like, no, you're hanging on to that thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're reliving it, and you're getting, this thought and feelings loop
Yeah.
that's literally yourself generating it.
Yeah, 100%. There's when you're talking about that, an illustration came on my mind that I use with my clients. Actually, it was my mentor that used this same thing, and I still use it. Is like we have some certain people in our lives that we've lived life with and through. They have hooks on us, emotional hooks, right? And these people are long gone. They could be dead, doesn't matter, but
Yeah.
their hook is still in you because you're allowing it to stay in there. You're still tied to that person emotionally, energetically. And that person might not even be thinking about you ever again or whatever. It could have been the bully from high school or whatever it was. But because because you haven't done that work on yourself, or because you haven't let that go, they're still hooked. They're still pulling you back, even though, again, they're not there. They're still pulling you back in some way.
Yeah.
Right.
And ironically, that's the stuff that makes you behave poorly towards the people in your life.
Correct. Yeah.
So, oh man, I love where this conversation's going. So I can visualize, you releasing it, because I've been in similar things. But how do we explain that better to people that are like, that's stupid? Like, you two are fruitcakes. Like,
That's okay. I'm good with that.
My dad was a dick, or my mom was. I'm super hurt by what they did. I'm never gonna get over it. What can we give those people to work with?
I would say first and foremost, you get to choose how long you want to hold on to that. Of course they hurt you. Of course you're hurt. It's totally valid. And that's the thing, is a lot of us will hold on to it because we're actually not in it. We're not actually processing it, letting it go. And to let it go, you have to feel it, right? Like, it's a very cliche thing. To heal, you have to feel.
Yeah.
Right? So the day that you want to let that thing go, you're going to have to allow yourself to fully feel the pain of that experience or experiences, and then make that choice. I think in the feeling of it, you make that choice of like, I don't want this for myself anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be carrying this anymore. Right. So again, yes, of course they hurt you. Of course it was hurtful. Of course you're angry and upset. And you should be if somebody's mistreated you and really, really hurt you. And again, you're the one that's you're carrying this with you. It's not gonna change what's happened. It's what's gonna change is your future, right? How you move forward. If you choose to continue to say that's not okay, he's an asshole, and you can still say he's an asshole, but the energy behind that is what's keeping you feeling that way, and again, living, like we said, living in a certain way, because we're still holding on to that hurt. And it doesn't kind of happen overnight. Everybody's had different experiences. So like, I cannot speak for someone who's been physically abused or raped or anything to that. Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know what you've gone through. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say is, for those who've been really, really hurt in those ways, it's not that like in a session or like in a month, like you're going to let go of this, but it's a choice of being in that process to let that go, to feel that pain, to resolve it, to understand it, and to move forward. Right. But you got to give yourself the opportunity to even get there. Right. Am I making sense of what I'm sharing?
Oh, 100%. And here is where it gets tricky with men specifically, because we're asking them right now, you got to feel these things. Mm-hmm. You got to have emotions. You got to look at your emotions. Yet society does a crap job of allowing us to even have emotions.
Yeah.
So it's programming on so many levels. And, I know for me, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of shame around facing that stuff. There was hell of a lot of crying.
For sure.
But that crying is releasing that emotion. Mm-hmm. So how do we help guys realize, like, okay, here's the man you want to be. Like, you create this image. Perhaps it's stoic. Perhaps it's really funny. Perhaps it's like super successful business guy. For me, the best way to get there is deal with all this stuff, because the rest of it, I'm going to actually use the word, it becomes easier.
Mm-hmm. Starts becoming easier.
Yeah. So for guys that are afraid to face those emotions, what could we tell them?
Yeah. First, if they're afraid, I'd say, what are you afraid of? Like, are you afraid of not being a quote unquote man? Or are you afraid that if you allow yourself to feel, that you don't know when you're going to stop feeling?
Ooh, yeah.
right? And so I would say first and foremost, challenge your programming, right? Question what you've been made to believe, regardless of how many the guys around you or your family or whoever gave you that programming, or society, obviously society, but question that. And I'd question it this way: are you a man, or are you a human being first? Human being first. Because if you're a human being first, then a part of being a human being is you have these different aspects of self, right? Um, when you were talking a minute ago, the stupid illustration that came into my mind, it's like, imagine if society said men can't shit. If men shit, go to the toilet and they shit, then you're not a man.
Yeah.
You got to hold that stuff in, right?
It's literally the same.
It's the same. It's the same,
because
right?
it becomes toxic.
Yes. Yeah. Imagine you're walking around with all this like actual shit,
Yeah.
and you're like, I can't let it go because I'm not a man.
Yeah.
Right? Like this programming, like, I can't, this fear, like, I can't let this go because if these guys find out about this, I'm never going to be able to live this down. It's stupid, right? And like when you say it that way, it's like, no, go to friggin' washroom, let it out, right?
But and I love this analogy. I'm going to totally use this analogy now. Did you just make that one up?
No, I've had
You've used it before, but that would make you toxic. It would literally cause you physical harm.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually no different with the emotions.
No different. Yeah.
No different. And
yeah,
I get it. Some guys are going to hear this and go like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. But you know, the thing you touched on was we're humans first.
Yeah.
First. That is so important. You do have emotions. You do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I've heard some guys say, I'm just not emotional. I'm like, bullshit. That's actually not true. You've just been taught to suppress them and not address them.
Yeah. So when you're happy, I would say that I got. So when you're happy, what's that? Is that not an emotion? Or are you just always like numb, like just like no expression?
Yeah.
No, it's the ones that you've deemed to be acceptable, right? That's that's when you say, oh, that's not being emotional. That's just being me, right?
So I've never asked you, what's your idea or what's your belief on societally why we got to this point?
Why did we get to this point? I think we weren't like this. I know we weren't like this historically, probably hundreds of years ago. I think maybe in the last, and I can be completely wrong and off on this, but I feel like what really has done men in per se into getting us to this path of, men don't feel, they don't express emotions, it's weak and all this stuff. I think that really came in the last 100 years since the world wars, right?
Yeah.
And then came the media, right? That's when radio and then TV came out, and then commercials and I don't know the word I'm looking for, capitalism or whatever you want to call it. Then all this programming came, but a part of it came with the war, where now we stripped away the men from the families, right? Back then, these men went and experienced very freaking traumatic shit. And then at the time, I don't believe there was what's the word I'm looking for? Enough resources for men back then.
Right.
And so these men, when they came back, now they were very, very wounded emotionally, right? Like they're very traumatized, and they don't know what to do, what they felt.
Yeah.
Add in the programming that started to come probably through, movies and all this stuff about this macho, was it John Wayne, the cowboy, and all this stuff. I think they use the term Marlboro Man, right? Like the smokes and like all that stuff that came in the 50s and the 60s. I think that's when you add those guys that just went to war, dealing with, then on top of that, the image of all that. I think that's when it really started go down.
Yeah, I would
That's my
agree with
thoughts.
you.
I can completely off,
I
but
would
that's
agree
my
with you. I
thoughts.
remember seeing some research on that somewhere too. I totally, and that was a long time ago. We're talking like 80, 90, 80 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But a generation is 30 years. I found that out a while ago. So we've been doing this like 3, 4 generations now.
Yes, yes, yes. It's enough
We
to
have
mess
no
us up.
reference
Yeah,
point for what
of course.
a healthy man, air quotes, man,
Mm-hmm.
masculinity. I am steering away from the masculinity term, to be perfectly honest, because we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
So who's our reference point? Who did we learn from? Our dad, who learned from his dad, who learned from his
Yeah,
dad. Well, that's
yeah.
4 generations. And you just said, and I agree with you, and think about it, if we all of a sudden went to war, we would just do what we had to do. That's what happened is they went into lockdown. It's like, oh shit. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't have time. They didn't have the bandwidth to deal with that stuff.
Yeah,
Fast forward to the 2020s, we're at the easiest point. It's the easiest to be a human being today than it's ever been.
yeah. It is.
So now the old paradigm from the 50s of like breadwinner is dead. It's so dead. Yet those 4 generations we just talked about, that's all that got passed on.
Yes.
And we're like, what's going on?
A
Like, we're
lot of men have not
confused.
caught up to
Very,
that transition.
no, most haven't. Like,
Mm-hmm.
most haven't. And I'm sure you see it with the guys I work with. And it's subconscious. We're like, well, we learned from our dad, if I do this, means I'm a man. And what I have seen, you know, women are, they lean towards relationship being very important in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Men are very like, I gotta like do something. I gotta like,
Yes.
so they've been like for the last decade or 2 decades, or when did the internet start? The 90s?
Yeah, 90s.
They've been like educating themselves. They've been evolving relationship. And here we are as men, just like, well, I'm just trying to be the breadwinner. I'm just trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to get the house. I'm trying to get the car because that's what I'm supposed to do because I'm a man.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say to that is like, yes, and yes, you get to provide financially,
And
and your female partner, it doesn't matter, female, male, but when you're in a relationship, your partner is looking for that emotional support, for you to be able to understand, we'll just say her, okay? For you to understand her, for you to be there for her, not just again provide financially. She wants you to provide emotionally. She wants you to be there present, like not just physically present, but mentally present,
yeah,
right? So there's different ways that we get to provide, and we don't get to take away the financial aspect, but it's no longer just that. Like a lot of guys, not a lot of guys, but at least some of the guys that I've worked with, they're like, I don't understand why my wife is complaining because like I make good money. I work
yeah,
so hard, yet she's
yeah.
not happy. It's like, well, yeah, she's not just looking for that. She's looking for more than that, right? Maybe if you worked less and spent more time working on yourself or with your family, you'd be in a better place,
And here
right?
is the hard thing. A guy in that position is going to his friends or his dad and going, I'm doing all the things. I don't understand. And they're just like, yeah, you're doing all the things. Good
Mm-hmm.
job. There's something wrong with her. She's asking for too much. That's just not true.
Mm.
But when you've got guys in a similar situation trying to give each other advice, I don't know if you see that. I definitely see that a lot. It's very confusing and
Of course.
it's very confusing time for men. So we're starting to talk a little theoretical, but what about like your experience with this? Because I know I have one. What's your
My
experience
experience with like emotion, like my emotions and
going
stuff like
from
that.
kind of like, because you alluded to it earlier that you're the provider, doing the job, doing all the things. How was your before the transition and then kind of waking up to like, oh crap. It's not
Yeah.
this relationship isn't this, it's this thing. It's how did you put it? It's It's this and it's
And
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I think I grew up in like my whole family is from Portugal, right? So European immigrants that came to Canada and had to work hard to, of course, to make their life, and they did. Um, and so there was that, we don't talk about our emotions, we don't show our emotions, and so that was sort of the what I saw modeled for me as well, right? I remember the only man I ever saw cry was my grandfather at my other grandfather's funeral
Mm.
when I was 11 years old. And I don't remember my dad crying, my uncles crying. I don't remember seeing that. I just remember looking at this. What I saw is this giant
Yeah.
of a man bawling his eyes out for his friend who had passed away. And I was like, oh, that's different, because he's usually very angry, very like whoa, like very loud. Not because he was upset or per se. It's just I grew up in a family where men and even women were just loud. The way that we talk, they're like, you're like, why are you yelling? They're like, I'm not yelling, right? That's what I grew
My
up in,
ex-wife
right?
was Portuguese, so I get it.
Yeah. So that's what I grew up in. But I know that I was always that guy who was more sensitive, more in the emotions, but just like every other guy's like, I didn't think about it. It was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't express this, right? That being said, if I watched a movie or something before, I would cry. Certain things I would cry, but other than that, it would never come out. Um, so you talk about before and after that period in my life. One, I had no control over my anger, and I'm still trying to work on that. Like that's my hardest thing is my anger, because I feel like there's so much there, even after all these years. Um, and so one, I had a really hard time because my anger used to come out at my kids and my wife. Everybody else, nobody saw the anger, right? Nobody saw the aggression per se. Not that I ever hurt anyone, but like verbally and emotionally, it was only against on them basically.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had to sit with that in that transition, it was like that really sucks it went on them, and in a way it still does, not even to the same extent, but still that thing where like I'm still trying to be able to be assertive. Something I put out today on Instagram is like I'm still trying to be assertive without getting into that aggression. Right? That's a fine line for me. So that's one thing, right? How I dealt with my sort of anger has changed, has improved. Because before it would be stuffed down. Being that people pleaser would stuff down, and then it would come out like in the wrong times with the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
All right, to my wife and my kids, which they had nothing to do with probably most of my anger. And then the other piece is, with my wife, I just never understood what she was going through. I never understood why she felt the way she felt, or none of that. Like I was so blind to that. Right. Again, I got married when I was really young. I was like 22, but still, like in my 20s and early 30s, I had no clue what she was feeling, what she needed emotionally, what support she needed from me. And so she never had that support.
Yeah.
And so afterwards, as I've been working on myself, it's like, okay, I see what I need to be doing here. And of course, like a part of this journey for me has been working on my marriage. And so I had to learn a lot of things to be like, oh, that wasn't the proper way of doing it. Because just like we said earlier, what did I learn? I just learned what I saw modeled to me,
Totally.
right? Thinking like, I don't need to do anything else other than just be here. That's what I thought. And I don't know if this leads to what we're talking about, but like that's what I thought was I just had to be present. My dad wasn't present in the ways that I needed him. So I just needed to do what he didn't do, is just be here. But what about my presence when I was present?
Yes.
How was I showing up when I was there? And I think I was checked out. I think a lot of the times I was checked out with sports. At the time, there was hardly no social media. It was just sports, right? And so I was here. I was present with my kids, but I wasn't really fully involved in their lives back then. Of course, in the last decade, it's changed. But so that's a long answer to your question.
No, it's great because did you know I'm gonna have to look the book up and the research behind it. Men feel satisfied and fulfilled in a relationship by just being there, whereas women need that emotional support. It's
Yeah,
very, very fascinating because what you just said is like, yeah, I just showed up and I thought that was enough. And
that's what it is.
that's the growth we need in relationships, is like, okay, I feel okay as a man. I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't know what she's talking about. And there's our side, which is to understand they need a little more. And it's their side to understand, like, that's just how we operate. Like, if I just show up every day physically, I feel like things are going well. And then, as you know, men usually come to you or I when it's like, oh crap, she said that's not enough anymore. And now they're like, oh, okay, I got to listen. I got to figure this out. And I think that's a really interesting problem we have in society, that we got both sides not actually understanding what the other needs. Because we're
Very good
talking
point.
about, as men, what do women need from us? Yes, we need to work on that. Also, women need
The
to
other way
learn,
around. Exactly.
what do we need?
Yeah. Yeah. There's something that I saw, and I know and so what I'm about to say, something I saw on social media, and the way that I gauge if that's truth or not, I can sense it. I can feel it in my heart.
Yeah.
And so I saw this one post a while back. I don't even know how long ago it was, but basically like that men need that assurance from the woman of like, you're doing a great job, you're
Yeah.
needed, I love you, like I love who you are, like that assurance we need. And when I read or watched the thing, I was like, oh yes, like that is so true. Like it's not about validation where like it's the people pleaser or the codependent man. No, it's just like that feeds us. I think that
Yeah.
feeds us as men to be able to hear the woman we're spending our life with to say, I see you, I value you, and thank you.
100%. And
So,
that is, man, that's just such a valid point, because social media is really kicking men's asses. Like, it's not fair. It's just not fair. We're human. I know for a fact every single guy wants to be the best version of themselves for their family they can be, but we don't know what that looks like. We have no clue, because we already talked about the last 4 generations have been like, lock down that emotion. And that's like the key to being more, to being present, is to looking at that emotion, because it's like this giant, it's like a freaking chain and ball and chain around your ankle. You can't move. So it's
yeah.
a very interesting thing. And yeah, when a woman gives a man that, it's not validation, it's support. It's healthy support. It's very different. I don't know if you've ever heard, I have an analogy of the relationship's a boat. I don't know where I got this one, but, and the the man, or the masculine part of that relationship, is the captain. You still need a navigator, which is the feminine, or your
Yes.
female partner. So
Yes.
that, like, affirmation, that support that you just talked about, that's just the navigator saying, yeah, you're on track.
Yes. Yes. I love it. Yeah, I've always, and I'm not sure. I think it's maybe John Wineland that explains it. It's like the masculine is the rocks in the river, and the water is that's flowing is the feminine, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, we're flowing, but we got to know that like you said, we're going the right way, that we're contained,
Yeah.
we have that structure, but we just need to know, hey, yeah, it's good, right?
Yeah.
Keep on going. So yeah, so I don't know where we came to the talking about this, but that thing, I think that's really important when we flip it. Like, what do we need to understand about women and what women need to understand about men? I think that's a big one. I think that's a big one.
It's not getting talked about enough. I've now, and I say that because maybe this is similar to your experience. I knew I wasn't showing up properly. I could feel it. I'm like, nope, I got more in me. I don't know what that is. I have no clue. And as I dealt with my stuff, healed my wounds, faced my emotions, and was able to like actually lift my head up and go, yeah, I'm actually in a pretty good spot. I could see more clearly what was going on, which is that it's not necessarily that men are behind. It is that between men and women, or the masculine and feminine, we're really not in touch with each other at all. We're not a team. We're not like working on things together. It's this division, and social media has done a really great job of putting us on two different sides of the fence.
Yeah.
And that is not going to work.
I agree. Yeah.
Hey, you said something about, and I think a lot of guys can relate to this, of your anger only showing up towards your kids and your wife.
My wife, yeah.
Is that what you saw your dad do too?
No. His anger came out to other people as well. Yeah. In my experience, no, it wasn't that. It was just I've sat with that. I think more so it's just I feel almost like I can express this and these people will still stay. But if I express it to my sister or to my neighbor or to a coworker, then they're going to judge me. They're going to shame me. They're going to run. They're not going to be here anymore, right? They're going to leave me.
Yeah.
Right. They're not accepting of it. It's like these guys have to accept it because they're my kids and that's my wife.
But
right?
was that
almost like that unconsciously?
Was that a modeled way of family operating? That your dad could do whatever the hell he wanted and everybody was going to stay no matter what?
Bingo. Bang on. Bang on. Can do or say whatever the hell he wants and we just put up with it.
Yeah.
Put up with it. And on top of it all, you better stay quiet.
Oof.
So, yeah, as you say it that way, I'm like 100% that's what I learned.
Yeah. It's tough, man.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to work through. And I think it's pretty common. You know, I think a lot of guys have seen their dads get angry. And then I know when I think of my dad, he had like different faces he would put on. And it always confused me as a kid. I'm like, why are you being so like, whatever way you're being with that person right now? Because that is not you. You're not like that at home. I don't understand what's going on right now. Because when you're a kid, you're like, you're just observing. You're trying to learn how to navigate the world. And the way we do that is watching our parents. So, you know, I definitely did that. I definitely was different at home with my kids versus my professional persona. And I'm embarrassed about that. I feel some shame and guilt over that stage of my parenthood.
Yeah. It's totally understandable and relatable, at least for me. And oh man, but something you said a minute ago or a few seconds ago was like, for me, it was also like, I remember being a kid and wondering, I wonder how my mom and dad act when they're around their friends or when they're at work. Do they act the same way? Like, is there a different person when you're here and there's a different person when you're there? I remember that. I remember being a kid thinking about that. Because probably what I did see was being a certain way with me and then being around a family member or a friend and being like nothing's going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think that's really what I remember that as a kid. Like, how are these people showing up in different, like, are they different? Are we supposed to be that? I think I even questioned myself. Am I supposed to be different around this person, around that person? Right. So that leads me to like, even, you know, the big thing for me is to live authentically. That wasn't authenticity.
No way.
That is far from it. Right. So it's so interesting. As you said that, I'm remembering like, I thought that when I was younger.
Yeah. I'd be curious. I've never really talked about this with other men. But I'm assuming maybe it's common, you know, if our parents modeled that, maybe a lot of people have that same experience, because it's confusing, man. I remember I just remember like questioning it
Mm-hmm.
because I grew up in a very religious setting. So, we were at events like 3 times a week and they acted so differently.
Different. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We act this
It's
way
just,
when we're here and we act this way when
yeah.
we're at home.
Yeah. I remember when I was a teenager, when my family hears this, they're going to be pissed, but it's all right. I remember I never was much into religion. That's the truth. And I remember going to church. So we had like a Portuguese church here in the city where they would have masses in Portuguese, and it's where all the Portuguese community would go. And my mom hardly took me to that church. We used to go to this other church. But the times that we did go there, and I was already a teenager, and I would see these people talking about other people in mass, being at the back of church afterwards, talking about what this person did and that person did, and I'm like, this is not right.
Yeah.
This is not okay. Like, I don't want to be here because these people are not here to celebrate God and all the good stuff. They're here to gossip.
Yeah.
And I was confused and also starting to see the clarity of like, I can't trust these people.
Ooh.
And
Trust. Yeah.
I'm like, fuck this. I'm like, I want no part in this. I want no part in this community. And I was never into like the cultural stuff.
Yes.
Because I was like, these people are fucking fake.
Yeah.
Because they say they're about all these things, but yet when nobody's listening, when not the big crowd is listening and they're just talking to their friend, they're talking about other people in their lives. And I was like, this is wrong. And I almost like, I have an anger. I still, in a way, have like this thing, and I will confront any person who comes up to me about this. I'll be like, bullshit. You love God. Bullshit. You love all these things. What do you talk about when you're with other people?
Yeah.
Like the gossip for me, and I know I'm going off a track what we're talking about, but the gossip piece was a big piece for me as well growing up. And that confused the fuck out of me because I was like,
it's not off track though. This is shame-based society. This is shame-based way of existing. When people are gossiping, I don't know if you've read John Bradshaw's Healing the Shame That Binds Us.
Yes.
So when we as humans talk about somebody in a derogatory way, it elevates us. We get to be better than them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's super, super common and it's subconscious. We don't actually know what we're doing, but that's what you experienced. And what I heard in your share is as kids, we know we have built-in attunement to like emotions, to I'll say almost what's right. We just know. And through our life experiences, we get programmed, we get shamed for speaking up, going, you can't talk to so-and-so about that. Like, that's horrible. And it's like, oh, be quiet. No, just be quiet. And it buries our authentic selves with layers of shame, with layers of beliefs. So when you said, living authentically is what you want to do, me too. Like, I've worked really hard on getting to a place where I'm like, yeah, I offend some people. They don't like it when I don't hear, will maybe point out what they just said is not accurate, or, they've contradicted themselves, or it's not aligned with the way they behave. People don't like that. But much like that kid in church, hearing people gossip, I told myself a long time ago, it's like, I'm going to be the guy that just says the goddamn thing that everybody else is thinking. And I didn't know why I thought that years and years ago, but it's because I wanted to be me. I just wanted to be authentic.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not like I'm not better than you. Far from it. I've fucked up a lot. And I'm okay with it because I'm trying my best.
Yeah. I think what the part is yes, we can own our mistakes, but a lot of these people, when you point out their shit, they're like, that's not true. How dare you say that about us or the family or the culture because it's fucking true and you don't want to see it.
Yes.
Right?
Because facing, I I meant to bring it up before, men facing emotions or men facing what we're talking about, like inconsistency. You know how much courage that takes? Like, to me, it is one of the most masculine things you can do, is look at your emotions, is look at these beliefs, is learn how to deal with the internal like shame and say to whomever in your life, like, that's not okay. Like, that is an immense amount of courage.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a bit of a conundrum, but for men that want to, feel more fulfilled, feel more air quotes masculine, you got to look at you got to look at the messy stuff.
Yeah.
There is no other way. And
No.
unfortunately, I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going to go here. There's so much social media shit saying you don't have to do that. Just do this like shortcut.
Yeah.
What's been your experience watching guys, or have you seen guys try to take shortcuts?
Like guys that I've worked with, or like just in general that you see out there on
just in
like
general.
in the world?
Just in general.
Yeah, I think there is guys that are trying to take shortcuts, thinking that, all I have to do is, work on my mindset, get up early in the morning and do these routines, provide, open the door for my wife and all that shit. And it's like, okay, and what about the other stuff? Oh, but that's good enough. No. And it still comes back to the hard truth that the real way to grow and step into being the man you're actually capable of being. Yes, we need all those other things.
Yeah.
And if you never step into confronting your pain from the past, the emotions that you've deemed to be not okay for you to express or feel, you're always going to be chained from your potential, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not that you do it once and it's over. It's that willingness to go there when you need to go there, right? But yeah, I think there is a lot of guys out there, and again, it comes where are they getting that messaging from, right? Are they getting validation from doing the morning routine and the mindset and the bringing in the millions? And no shame, I want to make millions, I'm good with that. But like, if you're just feeding into that and thinking that's what all I need to do, then you're cutting yourself off, right?
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to what we started was, do we need to hit a rock bottom? I think it is. Eventually, that guy, hopefully at some point in his life, he's going to hit some rock bottom where he's like, oh, and I completely missed this.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I have to do.
There's a high profile guy, I won't mention names, that was into the like sort of the shortcut stuff, get up early, do this, do that. And his marriage, I think he was fairly public about it. They had some problems, they got back together, and then it finally ended. And his like public statement was, but all my stuff still works. I'm like, I read your stuff, man. It's like, I mean no disrespect. I actually don't, because men are meeting themselves where they want to meet themselves, to the degree of fear that they can stare in the face, because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is. And if you don't feel like you have anybody there to support you in that discomfort, even worse.
And that goes back to, it's such a fucking shit show for men, because you might go to your guys and they might support you, and your heart and your gut might tell you there's something more to this. I don't know what it is, but my guys and my dad are saying this thing, because it's the information they've had access to.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Like, if you can find a group of men, not women, men,
yeah,
that are in the same place, I've seen magic happens. Like, you walk into this container, be it a men's group, be it coaching, be it whatever works, and you're like, oh, fuck, I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there is guys that have big emotions and feel like they want to cry and are scared to because they're going to be judged. And now I could cry in front of these other men. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah. What's this all about?
But it's healing.
Yeah, it is. It is. When I started my men's group, which was just a drop-in group at the time, for me, it was literally for this. It was for me, myself,
Mm,
proving to myself that I can, one, hold the space for other men, and two, that is, it was going to be safe. And
yeah.
when I started seeing these men randomly, like every week it was different guys. It wasn't like a consistent thing, but they would just log in because it was free, and they'd come to this group meeting every week, and I would hold that structure and guide them through, and then give them that space. What do you want to talk about? Whatever, and then give them that chance. Oh, I'm noticing your little whatever feeling this way. Like, it's okay, right? And then over time, starting to see that these men themselves were like, oh my gosh, I've never experienced this. I've
Yeah.
never felt like I can actually share like my sadness about this to other men, and these men are not gonna make fun of me. They're not like, they're there for me. You guys are just listening. I'm like, yeah, man, this is it. And so as those men were experiencing that, I was as well, for the first time, being in a group of men like this, by me facilitating it. But I've seen as well, like, just like you said, I've seen magic. I've seen like amazing things happen when men come together and they're like, we're safe. This guy's safe. And sometimes it takes a while, right?
Yeah, it
And
does take a
sometimes it
while.
doesn't, and sometimes it doesn't. And then it's like, okay, we're all safe here. Okay, I can just drop this here,
Yeah.
right? And it's awesome to see. It really is amazing to see. And one of the things that I look forward to is every week is my men's group, right?
Me
My
too.
mastermind that I have. So
And I think too, in that safe container, and I'm sure you like bring in some new understandings of relationships and just humanness,
mm-hmm.
and they're all like, that makes total sense. Why didn't I know this?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
societal like messaging, they've always known something's off, and then you give them something more aligned, and they're like, yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds right.
Makes
Yeah,
total
yeah,
sense.
yeah. That's like coming back to my story. When I met I already knew my mentor, let's just say. But when I met him for the first time to talk about what I was going through back then and to get him to help me, we had this deep conversation for like 2-3 hours in this coffee patio, like a coffee house patio. And I remember leaving and saying to him, why the fuck didn't anybody ever tell me what you just told me right now?
Yep.
Why was this kept from me for so long? And we just talked about emotions and how we were raised and how human beings are, and just stuff like that, just touching the surface. And I remember leaving thinking, why the fuck did anybody tell me this before? I was so upset. Like it's like this big secret that was being held from me. And then the same thing. I'm like, that's so true. Like that is true, because I felt that way. I just wasn't able to own it or be it or whatever, right? So yeah, man.
I think why you didn't know that is because you had to go through the life you had so you could get where you are today to be a teacher and a
Mm,
mentor. I honest to
mm,
God believe that.
mm-hmm.
Because without your shit,
You wouldn't be here. Yeah,
you wouldn't know what you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you have
I feel that way as well.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. We could talk for another hour, no
I
problem.
think we
But
can. I think we can.
I got one question for you,
Yeah, go for it.
and then I'd like you to share where people can find you. The question is, what message do you have for a previous version of yourself?
Mm, great question. What version? Any version?
You pick.
It's funny. I just put out a post about the almost exact same thing today. And there was 10 things that I wanted to say to myself when I got married. But I think the first thing that I put on that post, and I'll say what I really want to say to him, is look into this thing called healing yourself, working through your past. Even though you don't know what it means, you don't understand, you think that everything was totally fine with your childhood and your adolescence and stuff. Do some work on that, because
Yeah.
if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble, right? That's what I would say to my youngers, like that 22-year-old that just got married. I'd be like, find a therapist and start doing some work first and foremost. I think that's what I would say to him.
Love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, how can people work with you?
You can right now reach out to me on Instagram.
Yeah.
I have a Facebook page as well, but Instagram is the most active. I'm currently almost finishing up my website, so then you'll be able to connect with me there. But for now, at the Canvas Within,
awesome,
on Instagram, send me a DM. Let's have a conversation and go from there. Otherwise, just give me a follow and check out my stuff. That would mean a lot to me, because a part of the work that I love is just creating content, because I know that men are going to see it. Men
and
are
you
going to
create
understand it.
So much content, and there's so much value in every post. I'm like, how the hell does Kevin continue to crank out this much good stuff? So we'll make sure we put the link in the show description. Man, thank you for being here. I knew this would be a good one, and I had no idea where it was going to go, but I know for a fact there's a ton of value for men. So thanks for sharing so much.
Well, thank you for having me, man. Again, like you said, we can talk forever. I really enjoy this conversation and conversations like these, and I hope any guy that listens to this or watches this, whatever way, really has at least one thing land to make that like, oh shit, I don't have to wait to rock bottom, or maybe I'm rock bottom and yes, I am going to go do that thing, right? To give you that kick in the ass to be like, okay, let me do some stuff, some work on myself right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.